You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Laura.
Before we jump into this episode, I just want to take a quick second and ask if you haven't to give us a rating either on Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you listen. On Apple, if you scroll below the episodes, you can see the little stars. Just click the 5-star and submit. That's all it takes, but it really helps out our show. On Spotify at the top, you'll see the 3 little dots next to the episode. If you click on that, you can give us a rating. It is so fast, free, and easy, but it really does help our show. And if you're not following us on YouTube, we are trying to grow that. So if you would give us a follow, become a subscriber, that would be amazing. All right. Now, this is part 2 of our case about Jodi. This is part 2 of the story of Jodi Huisentruit. So if you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to that first and then join us back here for part 2. You ready to jump right in, Laura?
Yes, I can't wait to find out what happens.
All right. I need to take you back before the parking lot, before June 27th, before the bent key and the drag marks and the van idling. I need to take you back to what Jodi's life looked like in the months leading up to that morning. Because here's the thing, and we touched on this a little bit at the end of part 1. I do think it gets lost sometimes in all the suspect theories and the search warrants and the 30 years of unanswered questions. Jodi knew something was wrong. Not in a vague, paranoid way, not in a I just have a bad feeling way. It was a concrete, this is happening to me, I need to do something about it kind of way.
And she told people about what was going on too. It wasn't, It was something big enough that she felt like talking about it to her friends and coworkers. It wasn't this small detail that she noticed sometimes. It was a big deal.
Yes. She told people, multiple people, friends, coworkers, people she trusted. And what she told them was she was getting phone calls she didn't want, harassing calls, the kind that make you dread picking up your own phone in your own home, the kind that make you feel watched even when your doors are locked.
And this had been going on for a while. Is that right?
Yeah, in the weeks before she disappeared. And the people she confided in, they took her seriously. They were worried about her. But in that specific way that worry works when nothing overtly dangerous has happened yet, you listen, you sympathize, you give her words of warning, tell her to be careful, and you assume she's going to be okay because nothing terrible has happened yet until it has.
Which hindsight is always so brutal in these cases because it always starts like this. And then when something terrible happens, it's always that feeling, oh, well, what if I had done more? What if she had done more? All those things, just hindsight is brutal.
Yeah, hindsight is absolutely brutal. And what makes it worse is that this wasn't the first time Jodi had flagged something. We talked about how 9 months before she disappeared, in October of 94, she had filed that police report. The morning she'd been out jogging, one of her regular routes, and the truck had followed her long enough and close enough that she was genuinely afraid enough to call police.
Do we know what happened with that report that she made?
Nothing. Investigators looked into it. They found nothing concrete. and it essentially just sat there. There was never a suspect identified, no follow-up incidents reported. Life went on, but Jodi still thought about it, and the people around her remembered it. When you're a young woman living alone in a small town where your face is on TV every morning, where anyone who watches the news knows your name, knows what you look like, can probably figure out where you live with minimal effort in the mid 90s. The idea that someone might fixate on you is not paranoia, it's a reasonable concern.
And she was very visible in a way that most people aren't. Being on TV every morning, probably almost everybody in the community knew her.
Exactly. Local news anchors occupied this strange, specific space where they feel intimate and familiar to viewers in a way that, say, a national network anchor doesn't. People feel like they know her. They watch her every morning over coffee, bagel, breakfast. She's in their living room before they're fully awake. And for most people, that's completely benign. They just like her. They enjoy the show and then they move on with their day. But for some people, for a specific dangerous kind of person, that familiarity becomes something else, something obsessive.
And she couldn't have known which kind of viewer she was dealing with or anything like that.
Right. She had no way of knowing. And her coworkers, when they reflected on this later, mentioned that the possibility of an obsessed viewer or a stalker had crossed their minds even before she disappeared. It wasn't an outlandish theory in context. It was unfortunately the kind of risk that came with the job. And here's the detail that every time I come back to just stops me cold. The day before she vanished on June 26th, and we did hit on this in part one, Jodi had told people that she was planning to change her phone number because of the calls, because she was done dealing with it and she was taking action. She had planned to do it the very next day.
But she never got the chance. And that is so sad. And it kind of makes me wonder, it makes me think
If they
maybe
knew.
somebody knew that she was planning this and they decided to take action when they did because she was planning that.
Because otherwise, it is a weird coincidence that she would say that and then never get to do it.
Totally.
And it matters forensically. Whoever had been calling her, whoever had been making her uncomfortable for weeks, they were escalating. Or perhaps she was escalating her response to them. Either way, something had shifted enough that Jodi felt like she had to take action. And the timing of the disappearance the very next morning is not something that investigators, or really anyone who has researched this case, believes is a coincidence, just like you hit on right away.
Yeah. So, like we were saying, whoever was doing this, maybe they knew that she was about to cut off their access to her.
Right? That is one theory, that if someone had been using that phone number to maintain some kind of contact with Jodi, even unwanted contact, the knowledge that she was about to change it could have been a trigger, the thing that pushed someone from obsession into action.
And that is just so terrifying.
It is. And it's unverifiable because we don't know who was making those calls. Those calls were never traced to anyone. That truck from October was never identified. And the calls in the weeks before her disappearance had never been traced. And what we do know is that someone planned this. Someone was in that parking lot at 4 a.m., someone who knew her schedule well enough to be ready and waiting. And then the physical evidence that we talked about tells us it was not impulsive. This was not someone who happened to be in the parking lot and made a split-second decision. It was premeditated.
Yeah. And someone, it seems, had been watching her for a long time.
Agreed. Learning her routine, learning when she left, learning which car was hers, which apartment was hers, which morning would be the right morning. And that does narrow the field considerably. We're not looking for an opportunistic stranger who got lucky. We're looking for someone who knew Jodi, or at least knew enough about Jodi to plan this carefully. So let's talk about who investigators looked at. This is not one suspect. It's not one clean theory, unfortunately. What there is a series of people and possibilities that have been looked at over 30 years worth, and some of them feel more compelling than others. So let's walk through each one. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the development that I really honestly could not believe when I read it.
Are you talking about that white van?
We'll get to the van, I promise.
Okay.
The first person investigators looked at seriously outside of Van Nuys was a man named Tony Jackson. And the reason Tony Jackson came up is almost as unsettling as anything else in this case, because it's not like he showed up on investigators' radar through careful detective work. He came up through a jailhouse tip. Tony Jackson was, at the time of Jodi's disappearance, living in Mason City, specifically, and you're not going to believe this, 2 blocks from the KIMT television studio where Jodi worked.
So just 2 blocks. How close was that to her? Because she was about a mile away. Was he 2 blocks past that or in between her and the studio?
That is a good question. I am not sure, but even if it was 2 blocks on the other side, it's about 6 blocks-ish, I believe, for a mile.
Okay.
So either way, within
Still
a mile.
really close.
Yeah. Really close. Now, Jackson was not just some guy who happened to live nearby. He was a convicted serial rapist. He had multiple victims. He had a history of targeting women.
And he lived very close to her and her workplace.
Yep. And in a town of 30,000 people, no less. He also, according to reports, frequented some of the same local bars that Jodi and her friends went to. So it's not impossible. It's actually quite plausible that he had seen her, knew who she was, maybe even encountered her in person at some point.
Yeah, you would feel like in a town that small with probably limited places to go that he very easily could have encountered her, seen her, been watching her on TV and then saw her out in public.
Followed her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Way too close for comfort, in my opinion. And here's where the jailhouse tip comes in. After Jackson was imprisoned on his rape convictions, a fellow inmate came forward and claimed that Jackson had written rap lyrics, actual written down lyrics that described burying a woman near a farm silo in Tiffin, Iowa, which is a few hours from Mason City.
Wow. So rap lyrics about a burial site.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Investigators took it seriously enough that in 1998, law enforcement went to Tiffin with cadaver dogs and searched a farm property based on that tip.
And did they find anything?
They found nothing. The search turned up no human remains, no evidence connecting the site to Jodi. And by 1999, the Mason City Police Department issued a formal statement saying that after a thorough investigation, interviews, crime lab analysis, a polygraph even, that Jackson was not considered a viable suspect at that time.
At that time?
Exactly. At that time, which is doing a lot of work in that sentence. He was never fully cleared, never publicly eliminated, but there was one other detail that stayed with investigators and with people close to this case. While in prison, Tony Jackson was reportedly overheard saying, and I want you to hear this, Jodi's dead.
And she's still classified as a missing person at this time.
Yes, while she's still classified as a missing person, not confirmed that she had passed or not even declared legally dead. That didn't happen until 2001. He said Jodi's dead in a context where, unless he knew something, there was no reason to state it as a certainty.
Do you think he was just talking because he had seen things, I'm guessing, on the news and different things like that, that he's just
Very
saying things like
possible.
that?
Possibly. It doesn't have a very good explanation. Jackson, for his part, did break his silence in the 2025 Hulu documentary, and he did say directly on camera, I had nothing to do with that case. Investigators have not elevated him to a named suspect, but the proximity, the comments, the lyrics, the tip, none of it has ever been fully explained away either.
So he's just hanging out in the background of this case forever then.
Lurking. Yep, that's the right word for it. Yes. The second name that comes up, and this one is newer, it gained attention more recently, is a man named Christopher Revek. Now, Christopher is a little different from the other names in this case because he can't speak for himself. He died by completing suicide in a jail cell in 2009 while facing a homicide charge in the death of a woman. Investigators also believe he was responsible for at least one other woman's murder. So we're talking about a man with a documented pattern of violence against women.
What was his connection to Jodi then?
His connection is geographic. It is, I have to say, one of those details that feels too strange to be coincidental, even if it might be. At the time of Jodi's disappearance, Christopher had an ex-girlfriend, and that ex-girlfriend lived in Mason City. Specifically, she lived right next door to John Van Nuys on the other side of his duplex.
Oh, interesting. So his ex-girlfriend lived on the other side of John's duplex, correct?
Yep, just on the other side of the wall. Yeah.
So Revek, a man who later turned out to be a violent killer, had a direct geographical connection to the last person to see her alive.
Yes.
And I mean, they weren't dating at the time, right? Because she was an ex-girlfriend. No.
Oh, future ex-girlfriend. I think they were dating while Jodi was over at Van Nuys's occasionally, though. He had been there when she had been there.
Okay.
They had broken up by the time she disappeared.
But he could have seen her
Mm-hmm.
in the interim, I guess.
Yeah, right. So Revek had a reason to know a place that Jodi spent a lot of time at, had a reason to have been there, had a reason to know the layout of the area, the parking lot, the neighborhood. Now, Revek's ex-girlfriend had moved out a few months before Jodi disappeared. So when she disappeared in June, he wasn't actively connected to that address at the time. And there's no confirmed evidence that he was in Mason City on June 27th, 1995.
But there's no confirmation that he wasn't.
Right. The 90s of it all. No confirmation that he wasn't. And now that he's passed, there's no way to ask him. I'm not sure if he has DNA in the system. I would assume so, but I don't know if they are able to run it against anything they might have from Jodi's case. But it's this open possibility, right? Mostly proximity.
That's interesting. He seems less suspicious, I guess, than the others. Just more of a coincidence, but with his background, that's really suspicious too.
Right. Now, I'll be honest with you, out of all the names in this case, he's the one I feel the least certainty in any direction. Like the geographic connection is definitely striking, but it's not the same as evidence. What I can tell you is that investigators were still actively looking at his possible involvement as recently as late 2024. A Mason City detective met with a Wisconsin sheriff specifically to compare notes and revisit leads connected to him. So he hasn't been ruled out by investigators.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, before we get to the next person of interest, the one connected to the van, I need to tell you about the journal. It's one of the strangest, I guess, subplots in this entire case. It involves behavior from someone who absolutely should have known better. In June 2008, 13 years after Jodi disappeared, the Mason City Globe-Gazette newspaper received a package in the mail. It was a large envelope, no return address, postmarked from Waterloo, Iowa. Inside were photocopies, 84 pages of photocopies. These were all from Jodi's personal journal.
Oh, interesting. Had they had her journal?
Yeah, it had been in police custody since 1995. It was evidence in an active investigation, and someone made copies and mailed them anonymously to a newspaper.
Oh, wow. Who would do that?
Well, that's the thing. Within days of the newspaper receiving the package, the sender came forward. And when I tell you who it was, I need you to take a breath first.
Okay.
It was a woman named Cheryl Ellingson. Now, she was the wife of David Ellingson, the former chief of the Mason City Police Department.
Okay. So the former police chief's wife mailed evidence that had been in police custody to a newspaper?
Yeah. Which means her husband, the man who had led the police department, had taken copies of key evidence item home with him when he left office.
Okay. That's really interesting.
I wish
I don't
they
know if
could
that's
see your
the best
face.
way.
It's a misuse of evidence. And the Mason City Police Department's response to this was, and I want to be precise here, they confirmed who the sender was. They gave no explanation for why the former police chief had taken evidence home. And they gave no explanation for why his wife then decided to mail it to a newspaper 13 years later. There were no charges, no disciplinary action, no public accounting, just this happened, here's who did it, moving on.
That's very interesting. It seems like a significant thing to just move on from.
Yeah, it does. And it raises questions about the integrity of the investigation in its early years that have never been fully answered. I mean, what was in that journal? What was the police chief seeing in those pages that made him take a copy home? Was there something in Jodi's own words that pointed towards someone specific? The contents of the journal have never been fully disclosed publicly. Law enforcement still has the original. And whatever Jodi wrote in those 84 pages, whatever she was thinking, whoever she was writing about in the weeks and months before she disappeared remains largely sealed away from the people who want answers most.
So the newspaper didn't do anything with those pages then.
They at least had the integrity not to publish them.
Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
But her own words just locked away somewhere.
Yeah. For over 30 years, I would think her family would want some of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I try not to go down conspiracy rabbit holes, especially with this one. Sometimes things happen for boring, mundane reasons that look really sinister or suspicious in hindsight. Maybe he took a copy home because he was obsessed with the case and wanted to keep working on it. It's possible his wife mailed it because she thought it might generate new tips. And maybe it's more sad than suspicious. But in this case, the early investigation has been criticized. State representative literally wrote an opinion piece about a possible cover-up by Mason City officials. So the journal incident does not help inspire confidence.
Yeah, definitely not. What kind of criticism was going on about the investigation?
In 2016, a retiring Iowa state representative wrote publicly about his experience with the case as a member, at the time it happened, of the State House Public Safety Committee. He suggested that there had been a cover-up by Mason City officials. Now, in his opinion piece, he didn't name names or provide specifics, and nothing that led to any formal action, but the suggestion has lingered. And when you combine it with that sealed warrant and the former police chief taking evidence home, 30 years without a single arrest. It's really not hard to understand why some people close to the case feel like something beyond just bad luck has maybe kept it from being solved.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's being protected there.
It makes me wonder exactly that. We got to it. Here's where I will tell you about the white van and the person connected, because this is where this case, 30 years cold, full of dead ends, sealed documents, was suddenly cracked open again in 2025.
Okay, I'm so ready. Tell me about the van.
Okay, so go back, think about the parking lot, the white Ford Ecoline idling in the dark at 4 a.m., the van that was there when Jodi was taken and gone by the time police arrived, the van nobody got a plate for, nobody got a clear look at the driver, the van that just evaporated. For years, it was a thread with no end to pull. Investigators knew it existed. They knew it was suspicious. They just had no idea whose it was. And then, 30 years later, a woman came forward who had been sitting with something for a long time, a woman who had been watching this case from a specific, painful, personal vantage point. Her name is Patty Niemeyer, and Patty was Jodi's childhood best friend.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And what she had to say about her ex-husband is the kind of thing that makes you feel like the floor has shifted underneath you. Her ex-husband's name is Brad Millerburn, and Brad owned a white Ford Econoline van.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So tell me more about that.
All right. So Brad was married to Patty, who was Jodi's best friend for years. And according to Patty, throughout their entire marriage, Brad had what she describes as a fixation on Jodi. He brought her up constantly, asked what she was doing, asked about her life, showed an interest in Jodi that went beyond what you would expect from a friend's spouse, making polite conversation.
Yeah, I think that would bother me too. Were they still friends, or because you said childhood best friend? Were they still
Yeah,
friends at the point she disappeared?
they were still friends. I don't believe that they were very close at that point or like living next to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really bothered Patty. She said so directly, but she told herself it was nothing. And people do that. You rationalize, you don't want to believe the uncomfortable thing. Now, here's where it gets layered. There are several details that pile up around Brad in a way that is, let's say, much more difficult to dismiss as pure coincidence compared to some of the other things we've talked about. First, Brad lived approximately 3 hours from Mason City, not in town, not a neighbor, 3 hours away. But according to Patty, she says she is 100% certain of this. Brad came to Mason City and met with Jodi in person. He had taken her out once in the fall of 1994, and he called her in the weeks just before she disappeared.
Wow, he was calling her. The woman whose phone was being used to harass her?
Yeah. He called her, and whether his calls were part of what was scaring her, we don't know. But the timing. Now, the second detail, are you ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
Patty and Brad finalized their divorce on June 23rd, 1995.
Oh, wow. So just 4 days before Jodi was taken?
4 days. Yep. 4 days after signing those divorce papers. Whatever had been holding him in place, a marriage, life, obligations, was officially dissolved.
And that's really interesting because that was going to be one of my questions had he been home that night. But if they had just got divorced, and also if they had been separated, she wouldn't know if he had been there following her, all of those types of things.
Yes.
So that doesn't feel like a coincidence.
Right. Detective Terrence Prochaska, who has been the lead investigator on this case for over a decade, said in that 2025 documentary, and I want to quote this. He said, quote, "Coincidence happen, but this one, there's a lot stacked up." Now, that is a detective being as measured as a detective can be, while also clearly telling you that this is not something he is dismissing. All right, third detail. 10 years after Jodi disappeared, the 10th anniversary, which would have been June 27th, 2005, Brad called Patty out of nowhere. They'd been divorced for a decade. He hadn't been in contact. And the first thing he said to her was, quote, "Do you realize what day it is?"
Ew, that's so weird. Like, why would he make that call and say that?
Right. Why would you make that call on that specific day to the best friend of the woman who disappeared, unless that day meant something significant to you?
Yeah, a person with nothing to do with that who've been divorced for over a decade, haven't really talked to her. I don't feel like that person would make that call unless, like you said, it was significant or specific to that person.
Right. It is baffling to do that. And if you had nothing to do with it, why would you remember the exact date 10 years later, let alone
Yeah,
pick up a phone to call and ask about it?
very bizarre.
And then this is the part that made me have to take a minute when I was reading. In 2022, ABC aired a 2020 special on Jodi's case called Gone at Dawn. Patty watched it and something clicked. She called the Mason City Police Department and told them about her ex-husband. Investigators showed her something that had never been shown to the public. They had an unreleased composite sketch based on witness descriptions of a man who had been seen near Jodi's apartment complex the morning she disappeared. A man in a hat, facial hair, acting strangely near the building. Patty looked at that sketch and she said, "I see Brad Miller burned. That is him to a T."
Wow. So his own ex-wife identified him from a police sketch.
Yep, his own ex-wife who had no reason to lie and probably everything to lose emotionally by saying that. She's essentially implicating someone that she had spent years building a life with in the disappearance of her best friend.
Wow. That took some courage.
Absolutely. Investigators took it really seriously. They tracked down Brad and interviewed him. It was about 90 minutes of an interview. And here's what the detective noted about that conversation. Brad was nervous, visibly, and throughout the entire 90-minute conversation about the disappearance of the woman he had known, he did not ask a single question about the case.
Wow. 90 minutes and he didn't ask anything?
Nope, not one question. Not, "Do you know what happened to her? Have you made any progress? Do you have any idea who did it?" The kind of questions that really any innocent person sitting across from the detective talking about a woman they knew would
Yeah.
naturally ask. He said nothing. He just answered and appeared in the detective's assessment shaken.
Do you feel like dazed is the word that they would use?
Yeah, that is a word that investigators used to describe him as well. Now, Brad did cooperate. He gave his DNA, he took a polygraph. The results of that polygraph, though, have never been publicly disclosed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. He's never been charged with anything. He denied any involvement and he declined to appear on camera for the Hulu documentary. But in October of 2024, investigators searched a property in Minnesota. It's a wooded site near a farm that was being developed for an apartment complex. The site was adjacent to a property that Brad had previously owned.
Oh, interesting. They searched a land next to his old property.
Yeah, they were looking for remains for Jodi.
Did they find anything?
They found animal bones, but
Okay, but did they keep searching below those? Because that's how you hide human remains, I've been told.
that is exactly what I was thinking. The search was labeled officially inconclusive. They said
Hmm.
they found nothing connected to Jodi, but here's what I keep coming back to. The thing that sits with me when I close this and try to stop thinking about this case. Patty spent years married to a man she now believes might have taken her best friend. She watched Jodi's face on missing person posters. She lived through the anniversaries, the news coverage, the decades of silence. And somewhere in the back of her mind, something had always bothered her. But it took that 2020 episode in 2022 for her to finally make the call.
Wow, I can't imagine carrying that all those years.
I can't either. And the fact that she came forward twice because she had actually reached out to police in 2017 and it was overlooked the first time. The fact that she kept pushing that is the reason that this thread exists at all. It's the reason investigators searched the site in Minnesota, and it's the reason that Brad's name is now part of this case's public record. One woman refusing to let it go.
So, where does that stand now with Brad? Because to me, he seems highly plausible as a person of
Highly,
interest.
yeah. As of today, he's not been charged. He is a person of interest, but not a named suspect. The investigation is ongoing. The case is still officially open. The palm print on the pole is still sitting in evidence, still unmatched, still waiting for the right comparison sample to come along.
For 30 years, did they collect a palm sample like of Brad?
I believe so. I don't know if they didn't match, but they're still looking. There's probably a world where they're not 100% sure that the palm print came from whoever did this. I don't know how you would know for sure. I could see it if it
Yeah.
matched somebody, and we also have them owning the van, and we have DNA, and we have other pieces of evidence that it could help support the case
Yeah.
and the theory and a conviction one day. But also, I would bet if it doesn't match these different suspects, that it doesn't rule them out, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
That makes sense.
Before we wrap up this episode on Jodi, I want to come back to something. We've spent a lot of time in this episode talking about the parking lot and the different evidence items, the different suspects, and all of that matters. All of that is important, but I definitely don't want to leave this episode as just a collection of evidence and details and suspect theories. I want to bring it back to Jodi. She was so much more than this case. Jodi was the youngest daughter in a family that adored her. She was a kid from Long Prairie, Minnesota, who decided she wanted to be on television and then went out and made it happen through sheer determination, a 3 a.m. alarm clock that she never once hit snooze on. She was the woman who made her coworkers feel like that horrible early morning shift was worth showing up for. She was funny enough to coin a line about being on the air instead of in the air and have it stick with people for over 30 years. She was a golfer, state champion twice. She was someone who trusted people, who collected friends, who showed up for her community in a town that showed up right back for her.
And she felt like something was wrong. She was trying to protect herself, talking to people about it, and this still happened. I feel like we see that so many times in different cases, and it's so unfortunate and so sad.
It is. It's so sad when they are taking the steps or they're doing the things to protect themselves and it just isn't enough or it isn't fast enough or whatever the reason is. But It does. It breaks your heart. I think about it going to change the phone number. Is it a
Mhm.
coincidence she was going the next day, or was that a catalyst for someone to take action?
Yeah.
The report that she filed about the truck, was that connected, or was someone just following her and then someone else started stalking her later? Both of those options are terrible.
Yeah.
And Jodi was not passive in the face of what was happening to her. She was taking those steps. She was doing the things that you're supposed to do. She just didn't get the chance to finish.
And just by one day. And it's so hard too, because even though she was doing all those things, who knows if changing her number would have made a difference? If whoever
Sure.
this was, they knew where she lived.
Hmm.
So even though she was doing all these things, it's so sad that the police report wasn't taken serious. Like all these things that led up to that, that maybe could have helped her because
Hmm.
obviously they knew where to find her, they knew where to watch her, they knew what her schedule was, all those things that don't just come from a phone number. So
Right.
even though she was taking those actions and doing those steps, talking to people about it, making the report, it's just so terrible that this still happened.
Agreed. We've seen it in Dorothy's case. She changed her number over and over. We saw it with
Yeah.
the Carrie Farber case. We saw it. Stalking cases really get to me. They're
Yeah.
really terrifying, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's tough that 30 years later, there's still so many unanswered questions. It's maddening. I wish they had been able to find answers right away. There's so many what ifs, but that one morning where everything converged, where she overslept for the first time, she was in too much of a rush, someone was waiting, and it just terrifying, terrifying
Mhm.
case. Yeah. Jodi was declared legally dead in May of 2001. Her body has never been found, and the person or people responsible have never been charged.
Does her family still have hope that they'll find who was responsible for this?
Her family is incredible. They've never stopped. Her sister, whose name is Joanne, went on television right in the days after Jodi disappeared and pleaded for whoever had her to just let her go. She said Jodi was sweet. Jodi would never hurt anyone. And Joanne has carried this for 30 years. The family has worked with the investigators. They've participated in every documentary, news stories. They've never stopped searching for answers. And also, the community of people in Mason City, they've refused to let Jodi's case go quiet as well. There is a website, findjodi.com, that was started in 2003 by two journalists, Gary Peterson and Josh Benson. Over the years, it's grown into something larger than a website. A team of former reporters, retired investigators, advocates. They run awareness campaigns through it. They've put up billboards in 2018 on what would have been Jodi's 50th birthday. They placed billboards around Mason City with her face and the words, "Someone knows something."
Someone does know something, and
Yeah.
you just kind of hope it's not someone who's already passed, because then how do you find answers after that? But
I mean, that gets a lot harder as the years go on, definitely.
yeah, especially after 30 years.
Yeah. But we've seen cases longer that have been solved, touch
Yeah,
DNA, or all sorts of new advances.
for sure.
Private investigator named Steve Ridge has been working this case since 2019. He was actually the only person to interview John Van Ice after Van Ice broke his more than 20 years of silence. Ridge has put his own money where his conviction is. He started offering a personal reward for information leading to the recovery of Jodi's remains, not even requiring an arrest and a conviction, just for the recovery of her body, just for the chance to give her family something to bury. He started at $25,000 in 2023. By September of that year, he raised it to 50,000. And then in December of 2025, just a few months ago, he doubled it again. So the reward for information leading to Jodi's remains is currently $100,000. And it says it's active through June 27th, 2026, which would be the 31st anniversary of her disappearance.
Wow, $100,000 is a lot, and not even, and just to for her remains, not even something that
Right.
leads to something else.
Not for arrest, conviction, right. It just requires someone who knows something to finally say it out loud.
Yeah, someone out there knows after 30 years, someone knew 30 years ago, someone knew 31 years ago, like someone knows something.
Right. Maybe it's someone who's been sitting with it their whole adult life. Maybe it's someone who heard something once and told themselves it wasn't their business. Maybe it's someone who is only now starting to understand what the thing they saw or heard actually meant. Whatever it is, that information exists somewhere in someone's memory, in someone's conscience, and Jodi's family is still waiting.
Well, and think how long it took for Patty to come forward.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
people have that out there. They, like you said, they may be holding on to it. They just need that push to
Yes.
say something.
Right. Or someone to listen. And I do think with that PI, Ridge, and the detective that's been on it for a decade now, which you don't always see one person staying on one case that long, I think you've got people to listen now. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like this case is going to stay with me for a long time. And it sounds like they're still actively working and trying to find answers. Hopefully, we can get a Google alert with some more
Yes.
information before too long.
Agreed. This case does. It stays with everyone who hears it, who finds it, who learns about it. There's just something about Jodi specifically, the red heels on the pavement, the bent key, who said she was coming right in. It just lodges itself somewhere in your chest and doesn't let go. And I think it's because she was so close to her car, so close to changing the number, so close to a different morning. And the distance between that close and actually safe turned out to be everything.
So, what do you think happened? Like your gut, not from what you've read. What do you think?
My God, I think this was planned by someone who knew Jodi. I think somebody who knew enough about Jodi to be dangerous. The harassment in the weeks before, the calls, the feeling of being followed, the part of the escalation. It could have been somebody who became obsessed with watching her on the news and had bad intentions. I do think the white van in the parking lot was not a coincidence. Whoever was behind the wheel had probably been there before at that hour, learning her schedule, waiting for the right morning. I think the right morning from their perspective was the morning she overslept. She was rushed, distracted, a little behind.
Yeah.
And I don't know who specifically. I don't have a good feeling about some of the people that we talked about, but also I don't think it could be somebody we haven't even talked about. The details about Brad, the van, the timing on the divorce, the fixation, the anniversary phone call, that's a lot. Those details do not feel like noise to me. What I will say is the details about and around Brad with the van, the timing on his divorce, the fixation that Patty described, the anniversary phone call, his own ex-wife looking at the sketch and saying that is him. Those details are definitely on my mind. And whether that leads somewhere conclusive for investigators, that's definitely what that Google alert I want to watch and see. Now, with John Van Ice, now that he's gone, the sealed warrant becomes even more important and even more frustratingly out of reach because whatever was in that affidavit, whatever justified GPS trackers on a man's vehicles 22 years after the fact is still sealed. still protected. And with Van Nuys gone, the argument for keeping it sealed gets harder to make, but the investigation is still ongoing, which means prosecutors are still pushing back. There is something in that document, I do believe that, and whether it clears Van Nuys or implicates him or points somewhere else entirely, there's something in there that somebody does not want the public to see, but maybe one day we'll be able to find out what that is. For Jodi's family, for Joanne, who went on television 30 years ago and begged for her sister, for the community of Mason City that still marks the anniversary every June, for everyone who has spent pieces of their life trying to find her, she deserves better than 30 years of questions. She deserved that phone number change. She deserved to get in her car and go to work that morning and continue. She really did. If you have any information about the disappearance of Jodi Huisentruit, anything at all, however small, however old, please contact the Mason City Police Department at 641-421-3636. You can also reach Iowa DCI Special Agent Ryan Herman directly. And FindJodi.com remains an active resource with the latest information on the case and the current $100,000 reward. The smallest detail might be the one that finally brings her home. Someone somewhere knows something. Thank you for spending this time with us, everyone. Crime Clueless is produced by me, Jenna, alongside my incredible co-host, Laura. If today's episode hit you the way it hit us, please take 30 seconds and leave us a rating and/or a review. It genuinely changes everything for newer podcasts, and it means we get to keep telling stories like Jodi's. You can find us everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. We're at Crime Clueless on all of them. If you want to learn more about Jodi's case or see the resources that we used to write this episode, you can visit our blog on our website at crimeclueless.com, or we'll post directly to the blog in our show notes. Crime Clueless is available on all streaming platforms. And as always, remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murders.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.